That could be sick.
Cascade does cast 2 spells.
Who knows? I don't know. Moving on.
That was the perfect anyway.
Well, howdy there. You've stumbled down into the territory of the MTG Thoughtcast and the Outlaws of Thunder Junction Precon reviews. You think you can get rowdy with these Commander folk? Let me tell you, this gang is here to rumble. I've got with me here the Baron of Boros Blink. It's Joseph Rubino.
Ooh, that's me.
Whoa,
Hello.
We've also got the Mono Red Ranger himself, Jared Bobier.
That's me.
And I'm your rootin' tootin', no good stacks shootin' John Kendall.
Oh, you're certainly tootin' there, brother.
Tootin' and scootin'. That's what I should have done. Scoot Swarm. Darn. Oh well, we'll get him next time.
Tootin'
We'll get him next time.
Rootin', tootin', scootin', shootin'. Oh, can you tell I'm excited about Thunder Junction, guys?
You know, something gave it away. I felt it deep in my soul, deep in my yellow belly.
He looks like a totally normally dressed person that
True. This
always
is
normally wears
day
clothes that look exactly
for one
like
John Kendall. What's going on, guys? Welcome to our
Junction?
mega episode, the Outlaws of Thunder Junction Precon set review.
Let's go.
Welcome. We're doing it, but before we do it, what are we doing first? We're clicking some buttons, y'all. We're hitting all the buttons down at the bottom there. We just hit a huge milestone. We hit our first 100 subscribers. Thank you. Oh,
thank you so much.
Amazing. Y'all are incredible. Let's keep this thing going. Keep on hitting those buttons. It's working. The robots seem to like us a little bit. Likes, comments, subscribes, all of those are super free ways to help us out. Completely free. And another completely free thing, if you want to join in the discussion, and oh boy, is there going to be some discussion about these precons and lots more. There's a link in the description to our Discord page where we're hanging out all the time. Come and check it out. Come and play some spell table games with us, but not with one of these decks. There is spell tabling to happen, but not if you're playing one of these Thunder Junction decks.
Yeah.
Let's go ahead and get into it, shall we?
Nice foreshadowing, Joseph.
Yeah.
Mosey on along through these decks.
Mosey on along. John, why don't you take us away? Talk about maybe some Outlaws, perhaps?
I'd love to, but how about as just a quick brief, Thunder Junction as a whole, from even both between the precons and the main set itself. What do you guys think of this set? How do you think of this theme, this setting?
Main set. Great. Precons.
I love the main set. Yeah, same exact.
Oh yeah. No, there has since this was previewed, since was revealed way back in like last September, like without hyperbole, this for me has been a huge step in like I've been so stoked about doing this. Wild West Magic. Like you can't get better than that. Dude, it's so
Mara's
cool.
been talking about it for years now, that it's been like on the short list to do a Wild West Magic set, and I think they've gone all out and they've done especially the main set very, very well. And it's neat.
Yeah, and some of that has carried over a bit into these precons. Are these the most rootin' tootin' shootin'? Probably not, but there is some good pieces in here, like a little nitpicks here and there. And we're gonna lasso them in. I'm gonna keep making awful.
Keep the count here.
Pun counter. Ding.
No, it's just John's storm counter.
Pun. Little YEE-HAW at the bottom.
Yes.
All right. So we can't have Outlaws of Thunder Junction without our Outlaws. We need someone to be doing this rootin' and tootin' and shootin'. And that is going to be our Outlaws commander called the Most Wanted deck, featured at the helm of Olivia, Opulent Outlaw. So this deck is Mardu. It's red, white, and black. The theming of it is going to be the Outlaws subtype that is introduced with this set is here. Olivia reads as 1 red, white, and a black for a 3/3 legendary vampire assassin. Flying and lifelink, whenever one or more outlaws you control deal combat damage to a player, create a treasure token. And 3 mana activated ability, sacrifice 2 treasures, put 2 +1/+1 counters on each creature you control. Activate only as a sorcery.
This is sick.
This is a real cool one.
So much good that's happening here. It's incentivizing you to hit multiple players. These are the immediate things I notice. You're highly, because every player you hit is going to net you a different treasure token. And it also is incentivizing you to not just use your treasures for big mana things. Obsessed with this.
Exactly. It's super cool. So to clarify the point, though, of what Outlaws is, Outlaws is a sub-parameter of creatures. Any creature you control that is of the creature type assassin, mercenary, pirate, rogue, or warlock, it is considered an outlaw. And so that is what this deck is trying to do. It is playing like an aggressive, almost trying to be typal, but that typal is spread out amongst 5 different varieties of creatures. The most prominent in this one is certainly going to be the rogues, the mercenaries, and I believe the warlocks. Olivia herself is obviously an assassin. Pirates, there are a few in here, but not as much. So, but that most every creature in here does fit within that parameter.
Pirates of the Wild West gets me.
Is so cool. That is exemplified as well, though, on the backup commander of this, who is also an outlaw himself, Vihan Goldwaker. Red, white, and a black for a 3/3 legendary dwarf warlock. Other outlaws you control have vigilance and haste. And at the beginning of combat on your turn, you may have treasures you control become 3/3 construct assassin artifact creatures in addition to their other types until end of turn.
Rules.
Dudes out here just raising the vaults.
Yeah. That works insanely well with Olivia, where all of your treasures become assassins, and then as those hit each player, you make more treasures that become more assassins.
It also just works well with them being treasures itself, because Vihan himself gives these treasures vigilance. They can now swing in for combat and then second main do their tap sacrifice for mana.
Whoa.
If need be.
So
both of these are very great options out of the box. I'm personally a fan of Goldwaker himself, but I can definitely see that this deck is built around with Olivia in mind at the helm of it. You are exactly as you had mentioned it, Joseph. You are looking to take your assorted outlawed creatures that are here, swing in at combat damage, presumably, and most effectively at 1 to each of your players that you have, so that you are generating as much treasure value as possible, and then boosting all of these friends up. And every other support piece that comes as part of this, most all of the other outlaw type creatures in here, there's a bunch of legendary in here. So on top of doing Olivia's own thing, each of these outlaw legendary creatures, they're all doing their own support thing to help you push through extra combat damage or remove threats from the board and goading and things of that nature. It's really, really cool deck. Obviously, like every other precons we have, this deck features new card designs in it along with the reprints. I'd like to give a highlight to some of those. My favorite one definitely is in the creatures. That would be Gray Waters Fixer. A 2 black and a red for a 4/4 lizard mercenary. Great creature types here. I love these, seeing things like dwarf warlock and lizard mercenary, and like the ones that are in the main set as well. Super cool. This dude, as a 4/4 as well, I think I said that, gives each outlaw creature card in your graveyard Encore X, where X is its mana value. This has been shown before, very, very powerful with Sliver Gravemother and other cards that can give Encore to cards that don't normally have or can gain Encore before, being able to just generate a bunch of tokens of that creature from the graveyard, you can do some really wacky shenanigans.
Yeah, that card is sick.
Yeah, and this card encourages the theme that we were saying about that Olivia wants you to be hitting every single one of your opponents if possible. Encore creates you a token equal to the number of opponents you have, and each of those tokens is basically assigned to that opponent. So it has to swing at each of one of those opponents that turn if able.
Great.
So sick, dude.
So
I love this. I love this. Yeah. So you take any, obviously this doesn't work super well with legendaries, but you take any outlaw in here, something dumb like, say, Direfleet Ravager, and give him Encore. Here's 3 Direfleet Ravagers that now enter the battlefield, go swinging at one of your opponents. Also, everyone has lost a third of their life 3 times.
Third and the third and the third.
Oh my god.
Real dumb.
Very sick.
Real dumb. Real dumb.
Dude, I love how this deck kind of feels like the old like gang of villains just together.
Yeah.
Like it's just like the
YEE-HAW.
most random assortment of villains that should never be in the same place, but
Yes.
they're all in this deck together.
This
Oh,
is
it's
what
so
the
great.
Suicide Squad could have been.
Yes. Yes.
Well, you
dude.
want to talk about the Suicide Squad basically coming back from the dead. Let's talk about my next card. Back in town is X, 2 and a black for a sorcery. Return X target outlaws from your graveyard to the battlefield.
They're
That's
they're
sick.
just printing out with an X these days.
That's
Yeah.
cool. That's
So
cool.
now, like the floor of this is bad because X of 1, you've now done the cost of, I believe it'd be Zombify, which just returns 1 creature to play. Once you start getting above like an X of 2, that's really good. It's a strange one, this one, because like if you have this X flex number between the cost of Zombify and Rise of the Dark Realms, then it's really, really good. If you are wanting this X to be like, say, higher than what Rise of the Dark Realms would be, then you probably would be better off just doing Rise of the Dark Realms. But what I like about this is the flexibility behind it, because I'm a very big advocate of your cards being multi-purpose and versatile over the variety of the game. So if this is something you need as early as turn 4, fantastic, you have it. But if you need something really hard to put a bunch of mana sink into to recur your board after a Wrath, this can also do that because it's got the flexibility to go up and down in its cost. I like it a lot. I like it very, very much. It's very clean, very simple. Just bring your boys back into the rodeo. We love it a lot.
Nice.
Last one I want to bring up real quick then is We Ride at Dawn. 2 and a white for an enchantment. Legendary creature spells you cast have Convoke. And when your commander attacks, create a 1/1 red mercenary creature token that has the mercenary token abilities that all the mercenary tokens in this set do. They have the ability to tap and give a target creature 1/0 until end of turn, only as a sorcery.
Banding.
No, I really like this. Convoke is very, very strong. Convoke reads in a way that your creatures that you have can help you tap to cast the card. But what's most notable is that Convoke can be used on the colored source. Convoke says that you tap the creatures, they either produce a colorless or a mana of that creature's color. So
I love that.
Spells with Convoke can, with the right board, essentially be free.
Yes.
And this I think would be a very great. This is a really great card in this deck itself, but take this one and throw it into something with Legendary Matters, and especially on Legendary Matters that is creating other tokens as they come into play as well. Like something like, say,
if I can throw a tidbit in here as well.
Go ahead.
We Ride at Dawn seems especially good with Vihan at the helm because he gives your other outlaws vigilance. The issue that I have with Convoke in the times that I've used it in practice is it just shuts you off from playing the game. So like you're using your creatures to cast spells rather than to swing. So if you have something like Vihan down, which gives everything vigilance, then you get to do your swings first, and then in your second main use them to Convoke.
Yeah, it is real good.
Synergies.
It's really good. And again, it fits well in this deck because, again, a lot of the outlaw cards that they have chosen to put in here, most of them are legendary. And then the card itself creates you mercenaries. And then, like you said, Vihan can turn your treasures into creatures as well that then can basically be tapped for mana without sacrificing themselves after the vigilance swing. You know what I mean? So like you can have this great synergy setup of like going to combat, swinging all your dudes in, and then on your second main, you know, tapping things down to put more legendaries into play, making more outlaws, more treasure.
This thing looks really cool. It looks like it can handle a lot of different things getting thrown at it, and it can just survive.
It can. It's really cool.
Resilient.
Starting to move over into talking about some good reprints that come in here as well. One to bring up is the reprint alternate commander that you could play out of the box of here, which is Queen Marchesa, originally from Conspiracy 2. 1 red, white, black, 3/3 legendary human assassin with death touch, haste. When she enters the battlefield, you become the monarch, and at the beginning of your upkeep, if an opponent is the monarch, you make a 1/1 black assassin creature token with death touch and haste. Very cool that she is outlaw, creates outlaws, gives you monarch. Queen Marchesa is a very good choice to be in here.
She's been a great commander for a long time, but has lacked the finishing power. So I don't even think it's a wrong plan to put her in the command zone either and have this be a Queen Marchesa assassins outlaw focused deck. That's something that she has been lacking for a long time. You usually have to resort to combo, especially in this color pairing.
Mm-hmm.
So having strong, they've been putting some good Mardu enablers in the last few sets. Between like going back as far as like the Dihada precon, this feels like an extension of Dihada with how many legendary creatures there are. And anyway, carrying on. That's a very good tie-in as well. Dihada would make a very good fit into this as well. Other interesting stuff that comes in here as well, again, with most every other legendary creature that comes in here fits the criteria of being an outlaw. So your best reprints in here, like Brina the Demagogue, about a $7 card, is a warlock in its abilities, and then gives you some really good back and forth on being able to get bonuses on attacking the opponents who have the most life and other opponents attacking each other. Really cool card. Obviously, a deck that poops out treasures, we can't have anything without Good Friend Academy Manufacturer stomping into the battlefield. Clang, clang, clang. Ding! Just another mark on the Academy Manufacturer gets better and better.
Just always there.
Mm-hmm. He is actually in my checking. He is the only creature in here not naturally an outlaw. He's the only one. But he had to fit into the treasure theme somewhere. So
I mean, roughly all of the commander options give you ways to make treasures. So
really good, really good. Lightning Greaves comes in here as well. A very good piece of protection for your outlaws. All these legendaries, a lot of them want to be doing combat related things. So being able to keep them safe and protected and allowing them to go fast, very good card to be in here. I was interested to see this card called Seize the Spotlight as one of the ones that was a bit higher up on the reprint value. It is a 3-mana sorcery that makes each opponent choose Fame or Fortune. Each player who chooses Fame, you gain control of a creature they control until end of turn, untap it, and they gain haste. For each player who chose Fortune, you draw a card and make a treasure.
Yes.
Was apparently
very, very good, because the correct answer in a 4-player game is this is going to be 3 mana. I make 3 treasures and draw 3 cards.
Yeah, it's very good. Basically pays for itself, keeps your hand filled, and then worst case scenario, if they really don't want to give you treasures, you get a creature out of it.
Yes.
Apparently was like some $5 card that was only ever in a previous precon before. So really cool to see it here. That's a good one. Command Beacon is also in the lands as well. This one has continued to sneak up at a high cost as well. Very good and efficient way to keep commander tax low, especially on an aggressive commander. Any of the 3 that you would be playing out of the box right here. That's a real good one.
Dude, I do not have a Command Beacon.
Dude, it's criminally underprinted.
I've never had one.
It's a very good. It's interesting, right? Just at the cost of needing to sack a land, pull your commander directly to hand, and then you've evaded commander tax for a turn. It's a really, really cool card.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Super good.
I would play that everywhere.
Some other quick real highlights I wanted to bring up is stuff that I feel is really, really cool that's in here. We already talked Direfleet Ravager. This dude is a monster. ETB, just drain everybody a third of their life real quick. That's how an aggressive deck can go fast. Just instantly drain everybody. Grenzo Havoc Razor is a real cool one as well. Allows to give either some extra card draw or give goading across the table. Keeps the board open for you to start swinging wide. Real fun there. Mari the Killing Quill. I'm real excited to see that one in here. It doesn't hit everything in the creature types. This one only hits rogues, assassins, and
Mercenaries.
Oh, it does hit mercenaries?
Mm-hmm. Assassins, mercenaries, and rogues you control have death touch.
Look at that. But yeah, this is a real good one. It allows you to get extra value off of those subset of creatures dealing combat damage. That's a real cool one.
Shuts down aristocrats as well. Just being an exile effect instead of creatures dying.
I had to stop myself in my notes from accidentally writing down Rankle, Master of Prankles, but our good friend Rankle is in here. The dude flying haste. That's and just subset of just throw. You start making more creatures down, just like throw all the subset that he can do. He's a real hoser.
This deck is doing the same thing for me that the party deck from the from one of the Dungeons and Dragons sets did, where I just went, "Oh, that's a cleric, huh? Neat." He's a rogue. Very cool.
Yeah, it's rogues and assassins that really like throw you off. Is like, "Ooh, that thing is a rogue." Surprise. Council Judgment in some of the removal. This is one of my favorite pieces of spot removal. You get to just be politics down the board of non-targeting exile. That's super cool. And not as super interesting, but I just thought it was really cool to bring up that there is a Trailblazers boots in here. There's something we were just talking about last episode. At least that was the card of mine. It was like, hey, you're not playing enough Trailblazers boots. Here it is in the precon itself. I got a huge kick out of that, not knowing that ahead of time. That was really, really cool.
Very sick.
But yeah, this out of the box as is, I think this is a really cool, like this deck is trying to do aggressive things. It's doing treasure creation. You're doing like typal matters while also having a broad stroke of that typal matters. Lots of legendary options that if you were to say buy this and kind of pull the pieces apart, you've got lots of legendary creatures that could go everywhere. It's really, really cool. I like this deck a lot.
Something I'm noticing before we start talking about upgrading it, and I think this can, at least for the ones that I have looked at as well, the mana base is very interesting in these, where there's a ton of colorless utility lands for a 3-color deck.
Yeah.
So I would say as a base, looking at all these decks, take a glance at the mana bases. I would probably try to get rid of some of the tap lands and some of the like Temple of the False God does not belong in this deck. That is
probably
that is
not. Yeah,
to pay. That's like the lesson that they teach you via the precons is that Temple of the False God is a bad card. It's like level 1 of playing Commander. If you can figure that out quickly, that's going to level up to level 2. But even things like, why is there a Bonder's Enclave in this deck? Like, is your Commander even 4 power? Nope.
No, but again, Olivia puts +1/+1 counters across your whole board, though, so it's not too hard to get up to 4. But I do understand what you're getting at. Yeah, but I guess here's the thing. Here's the push-pull. Is like this deck is trying to create lots of treasures, and apart from the abilities of both of the new legendary creatures that come in here, treasures are still treasures. You can use them for mana. So I
get the treasure makers out first, though. So I would say I would be cutting all the colorless things and just putting in some more basics, because there's only 8 basics in this deck. Yep. Again, criminally low.
Yeah, that's kind of wacky
take on the land base here.
Yeah,
that's a bad time. That's a bad time in game, is what that is.
So doing those kind of cuts, some other additions that I think would be really good to throw in here. There is a legendary creature from the main Outlaws of Thunder Junction set itself that would fit super well in here, and that is Laughing Jasper Flint. Is 1 black and a red for a legendary 4/3 lizard rogue. creatures you control but don't own are mercenaries in addition to the other types. And at the beginning of your upkeep, exile the top X cards of target opponent's library, where X is the number of outlaws you control. Until end of turn, you may cast spells from among those cards, and mana of any type can be spent to cast those spells.
That's a perfect card, dude.
That's hot.
That would fit so good in here. I'm surprised it wasn't in there.
Yeah.
If you're buying the main set and you're buying this precon, get yourself Laughing Jasper. There's also a bunch of just cards in the main set itself that also does like outlaw care sort of thing. But I feel this one would probably give you the most impact on your board.
Yes.
Yeah, that card's
It's essentially card draw
Mm-hmm.
in Rakdos.
Yeah, off of somebody else's. And again, allows you to steal other people's cards, turn them into outlaws in your board that are then affected by all of your outlaw synergies.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yes.
That's real good. Legion Loyalty is also another dumb as rocks enchantment that I think would fit really well in here. It's a real silly one. I believe it's 7 mana. It gives your creatures Myriad.
Yep.
Yeah. You're trying to get your outlaws to connect with every player. No easier way to do that. Blade of Selves could probably also fit into this as well if you're looking for something lower to as far as mana cost goes. But Myriad stuff in general would work really, really well with this because that creates you a tapped and attacking token at each other player that your main creature is not already attacking. But I like Legion Loyalty in here because, again, you're doing the treasure generation thing. You could ramp out into this a good bit faster than other strategies potentially could.
Mm-hmm.
And since we're doing a treasure deck thing as well, and Academy Manufacturer is already in here, let's do some of our other treasure friends in here, like Zorn. If you want to do Dockside Extortionist because he's a pirate, sure, go ahead. He fits the theme.
It's insane how well Dockside Extortionist fits in this deck for it not being printed in the precon.
Exactly.
Done it.
You could have
Just do it.
You could
not gonna ban
have
it.
covered my eyes and convinced me that Dockside was printed in this precon.
He could have been, right? What better place would he have been? He's a pirate that makes treasures.
Yeah.
But yeah, like Zorn and other, I don't know any others ones specifically off the top of my head, but other cards that do treasure benefits, maybe Goldspan Dragon, stuff like that, you know?
Yeah, that would be it. Ooh, what's Copper? The Copper one?
Ancient Copper Dragon.
Ancient Copper Dragon, yeah.
If you get that one to actually connect, man, that feels good.
Yeah, he's not an outlaw, but he will definitely make you the most treasures.
Yeah, definitely commits crimes. What's interesting is I normally would be against those super high mana value ads, but you're making treasures in this deck. Like Olivia wants the treasures to put counters on creatures you control, but at the same time, they're still just treasures. And same with Vihan. You can just use them to play these big things that give all your creatures Myriad and then end up netting you even more treasures. So I'm all for all of those ads. What do we cut
exactly,
here, John?
A couple quick cuts I can find in here real quick. Humble Defector is kind of strange in here. He fits the outlaw criteria, but like you don't really want to be sending him off to your opponents. That's just giving them a blocker and potential cards.
Is there any
cool.
way in here to sacrifice creatures? It's not a theme for sure.
Not particularly, no.
Because that's like the play with Humble Defector is because it's just a tap ability with the ability on the stack you can sacrifice it.
I suppose so.
I would assume that he is one of the outlaw subtypes.
Yeah. Another one that fits that really weirdly is Mist Meadow Skulk. It's a 2 mana 1/1 with lifelink and protection from mana value 3 or greater. Again, you could do better than this little guy. Just give him the boot.
I don't know. I kind of like him.
You're out.
He's a rogue. He's gonna get in there.
Another pick I would do is actually one of the other new cards that comes in this deck, Charred Grave Robber. Tuna black for a 3/1 skeleton mercenary. When he enters the battlefield, return target outlaw card from your graveyard to your hand. He has escape for 5 mana and exiling 4 other cards from your graveyard, and then he escapes with a +1/+1 counter on it. Like, he only then ever at best becomes a 4/2. That's really bad.
Yeah.
That's a lot of work for a 4/2. Wow.
That's a lot of work for a grave robber.
Yeah, this guy's real bad. Get him out of here.
Yep. I like it. Hey, this is a neat deck.
Yeah,
this is
that's the Outlaws. It's
mirror entities in this deck that, like, there's some serious. They've pumped this one up.
Mm-hmm.
I understand now pre-show when we were talking about the juiciness of this deck's why there was a bit of a disconnect, because you had this one that you were talking about.
As compared to
let's talk some Grand Larceny, shall we?
Let's go.
So Grand Larceny is the next deck we're going to talk about. Huge caveat before we get into talking about this at all. If Spell Table is your primary form of playing Commander, do not play this deck. Do not buy this deck. Don't play it. This is going to be a nearly impossible deck to play via Spell Table, because it's a deck that's completely focused around playing your opponent's cards and them being face down until you cast them. So there's going to be a lot of like, hey, everyone close your eyes and flip the top card so that I can see it and then write it down and then do the whole thing. So with that caveat out of the way, this is Grand Larceny. It's a Sultai deck. The face commander is Gaunty Canny Acquisitor. 2 black, green, and a blue for a 5/5, obviously a legendary creature, Aetherborn Rogue. Spells you cast but don't own cost 1 less to cast. And whenever one or more creatures you control deals combat damage to a player, look at the top card of that player's library, then exile it face down. You may play that card for as long as it remains exiled, and mana of any type can be spent to cast that spell. So this obviously harkens back to the original Gaunty that you entered and you did that for one person. This one is significantly better because, like we talked about with the Outlaws, it benefits you for hitting multiple opponents. So if you hit one small creature that hits each opponent, you're going to flip the top card of each of their libraries, and then that just kind of becomes part of your hand. Very, very neat. Obviously, you can see what we're going to be doing with this deck is playing a bunch of little things that want to be getting in and are cheap and largely unblockable. To be playing our opponent's cards. So it's going like, hey, I bet your deck's really cool. What if I played it instead? Prepare for the Rain of Salt playing this deck as well. People do not like when you play their cards against them. So lots of caveats here.
Maybe talk with your play group before you decide to buy this.
Oh, yeah.
Some people will absolutely hate you for this.
Quick thing to note as well, and this is, I think, a general feeling that we have. These precons don't feel like they've hit the bar for the bar that they've set for the last 3. Like, if you compare these precons to the Lost Caverns of Ixalan precons, it's night and day how different they're built, how different the reprint value is, how different the strategies are. These decks feel a bit more like old school precons, where they give you a couple different directions to go, but they kind of shuffle all the strategies together. So what I especially noticed about the Larceny deck is there's kind of 2 different things that it's trying to do. It's also trying to do this reanimator thing, and like playing out of your graveyard and playing out of opponents' graveyards.
It's on those Muldrotha colors. It was like reanimator. I can't help myself.
Well, it's like there's a which I'll be talking about this when we get to the cuts, but there's a Mimeoplasm in this deck for some reason, which it doesn't do anything that helps with the strategy of Gaunty. It's just kind of a good Sultai card that's in there. So I think with these, if you peel back some of the strategy and kind of start to inject a little bit more power into one of the strategies that it's doing, it's where I think these precons will start to shine. But overall, not impressed, and overall not feeling these. But let's talk about some of the new cards that were printed in Grand Larceny. So the alt commander is very neat. This is Felix 5 Boots. It's 2 black, green, and a blue for a legendary Ooze Rogue. It's a 5/4. It's so cool.
He's so neat.
Menace and Ward 2, and it panharmonicons when you hit a player. So if something dealing combat damage would cause a triggered ability to trigger, it triggers an additional time. So that works really well with Gonti of the whenever one or more creatures hits, that's a triggered ability. So with Felix 5 boots down, you're now going to get 2 cards exiled off the top of their library. That's like the obvious one. There's plenty of other effects, like I'm talking about reprints. There's an Orin Frostfang that's in this deck, which is whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. Love that. That is the direction that I want this deck to go, is just I'm trying to hit people. So not caring too much about Reanimator, not caring too much about good stuff. Couple other really cool new cards that's in this. We have the return of the Cipher mechanic, which is one of my personal favorites.
That is so cool.
So Arcane Heist is 2 blue for a sorcery that says that you can cast target instant or sorcery card from an opponent's graveyard without paying its mana cost. If it would be put into the graveyard, exile instead. That alone to me is really good, but then it has Cipher on it, which is you essentially imprint that spell onto a creature, and whenever it deals combat damage to an opponent, you get to recast that spell for free. So we're playing a lot of things in this deck that are either unblockable or largely unblockable. So something like a Slither Blade is in the deck. It's just a blue mana for a 1/2 that can't be blocked. So that works really well with Gonti. That works really well with Cipher. So it's like Voltron, but for spells. So that's Arcane Heist. Thieving Varmint is very neat as well. This is a cool little glue piece that I think a lot of people would overlook, but it's 1 and a black for a 2/1 Varmint with Death Touch and Lifelink that you can tap and pay a life and add 2 mana of any one color to cast spells you don't own. So this is going to just help you cast, like, let's say you flip something huge of your opponents and you don't have the ramp necessarily to get there, because spoiler, there's basically no ramp in this deck. It is very slippery. There's practically no ramp. There's practically no interaction. There's 0 board wipes in this deck. It is all gas, no brakes. You're playing little creatures and you're hitting people. So, which, like, you know, you're going to be drawing your opponent's cards. As long as your opponents are playing interaction and board wipes and things, you'll have some of it somewhere. So, again, I disagree with a lot of the choices they made in.
It just feels like if you play this, you bring a knife to a gunfight and you just like know it.
Totally.
you have to know.
Yeah. What's cool is this deck will scale based on the power of your opponent's decks.
Sorry, that was a loud water bottle thing.
I love that it moved your camera too. So it'll scale. So if you're playing with other precons, you're going to be playing precon level cards. If you're playing power level 7 decks, you'll be playing a power level 7 deck too. So it's a bit of a chameleon. Last new card I want to talk about, Orochi Soul Reaver, is 5 and a black for a 5/4 Snake Ninja Rogue with Ninjutsu for 3 and a black. And whenever one or more creatures you control deals combat damage to a player, create a treasure token and manifest the top card of that player's library. For all intents and purposes, this doubles your Gonti trigger, because you're going to... What I love about it is you don't need to attack with it. I love things that have that triggered ability on it, like Gonti, where you can set yourself up and then play it, and it just puts gas on the flames.
Yeah, that's freaking dope.
Overall, I was talking about this before we started recording as well, but this kind of feels like they took a Satoru Umezawa deck and a Paco and Halden deck and just shuffled them together and said, here's your deck. It's really cool strategies. I do wish that they put a little bit more into the power level of it, just to keep up with the bar that they've set. There is some decent reprints in here. It's not great, I'm gonna be honest. Our highest reprint value for a non-land card is Mind's Dilation, which is a great card, and it's one that I know John loves.
It's in my top 10.
Yeah, it fits the theme of the deck really well, but also, like, this is a deck with no ramp in it. So playing a 7 it's 7 mana, isn't it? It's 7 mana enchantment that is, it's just gonna rot in your hand. Like
your ramp in here is cards like Tower Winder that puts Command Tower in your hand.
That's not even ramp. That's card draw. It puts a land into your hand. I'm serious. Also, like, there's a Darksteel ingot in this deck. What are they doing putting Darksteel ingot in indestructible manalith? There's absolutely no reason to have, like, I could see if there was some, like, something that cared about your artifacts being indestructible or something, but, like, it's just it's just a bad card. Like, I don't really know what they were doing. Even like Prismatic Lens is not incredible. Like,
Guys, I'll say it.
ramp.
You guys can cut this if you want, but these are just reprint piles. That's what these decks are. That's why they feel like this.
It's
if you look at them, they're
weird.
just reprint piles, dude.
Now, here's what I will say. They've pumped up the mana base of this one. This is one of the best mana bases they've ever printed in a precon. We have at least two of the colors of the Lorwyn filter lands, which are unbelievable. There's a Twilight Mire in here. There's they also have the Signet lands in here that were just printed in the Fallout precons. Yeah, it's Flooded Grove. Like, the mana fixing and the mana base in this one, as compared to the Mardu deck, is really, really good. So Twilight Mire is the most expensive card in the deck. As far as reprints go, and that's just sad. Like, our $6 reprint is a land.
It's a bummer.
Womp
Yeah, I was
womp.
looking at the total value of Moxfield of this one. It's 105, which is really low for like precons.
Yes, that
those are
includes
way even the other ones in the
so
set
many
are
30 and 40 cent cards to get there.
This one's brutal.
So, you know, credit where it's due. They've pumped up a land base. If you want to play Sultai, this is a cheap way to get a really good land base for a Sultai deck. And the strategy of Gonti seems like it can be very cool. Let's talk about how to make it better. So, upgrades. This deck is asking for a Toski, Bearer of Secrets.
Yes.
Again, Orin Frostfang is going to be unbelievable in the deck to begin with. There's also an Edric Spymaster of Trust in the deck. So what you're trying to be doing is, like, even without Gonti on the board, I want to be able to hit all of my opponents and draw 3 cards off of it and just sit back and see what happens. So that when we play Gonti, it's going to just throw gas on the fire of, I'm going to draw 2 cards, one from the Edric, one from the Toski, and then flip a card off of the Gonti. All of a sudden I'm looking and I have a stack of 9 cards that I can play from. Love Toski in here. This is insane that they didn't print this in this deck, but Scheming Symmetry is sick here. Scheming Symmetry is like a $5 card. It's 1 mana, you and your opponent each Vampiric Tutor, and put a card on top of your library.
Oh, dude, yes.
So, like,
I think you've played this on me, maybe?
I love Scheming Symmetry to begin with. But when you can, like, bait them into, like, Scheming Symmetry, go find something. I dare you. Put it on top of your library. I'm going to exile it and then get to play it. You're going to make them tutor for a basic land to put on top of their library. So Scheming Symmetry in this deck is just Vampiric Tutor. And
you still get your tutor either way, so it ends up being a win-win.
You still get to tutor for whatever you want, and you're going to fake somebody out. So it completely negates the downside of scheming Symmetry in this deck. Crazy good. This is a very, like, meat and potatoes upgrade, but I think there should be a Liquid Metal Torque in this deck. I think people are.
Dude,
what's
you
that?
are so on that card. I love it.
People are severely underplaying Liquid Metal Torque to begin with as a politics piece, but there's also, the deck comes with a Trigon Predator. So Trigon Predator, when it deals damage, you get to destroy a non-land artifact. Let me pull it up real quick so that I'm reading it correctly.
Artifact or enchantment that player controls.
Oh, yeah. So this helps with ramp because there's essentially none in the deck, but also, like, if you have your Trigon Predator down, it turns into Trigon Predator can hit and nuke whatever you want.
That's sick.
That's
That's actually really cool.
And then if somebody casts a Reclamation Sage, you can politic with them and go, hey, I actually think you need to get rid of this creature. I'm just going to make it an artifact for you, and then you can blow it up. So people are underplaying Liquid Metal Torque. Another upgrade here. Shriekmaw. crazy good in this deck. Again, this deck is lacking interaction. There is a Feed the Swarm in the deck. There's a Curse of the Swine for some reason in here. And that's roughly it.
There's the Curse of the Swine in the Quick Draw deck too.
They really are pushing for Curse of the Swine, aren't they?
That's weird.
Anyway,
has that happened before?
What in the Ham Nation is happening? Yeah, there's the interaction package is pretty lacking in this deck. So what's cool about Shriek-Maw is on 2, you can play it and nuke a non-artifact creature. If you get to 5, you can play it for 5 and the creature with Fear sticks around, which Fear is a very good ability when you're trying to be getting your creatures in. So it is not just a like, hey, play more interaction. This is thematic interaction, I would like to call it. So that's the Shriek-Maw. Dude, Memory Lapse in this deck. Speaking of thematic interaction, Memory Lapse counters a spell and puts it on top of their library.
That's
for 1 and a blue. So, hey, sorry that you tried to cast that. It goes on top of your library. I'm going to hit you and then exile that card, and now I get to play it. Temporal Spring, though, is 1 green and a blue for a sorcery that puts a permanent on top of its opponent's library. So I'm happy with 3 mana to go, I'm going to get rid of any problem permanent, and then I get to cast it, and I get to be the problem. So the less that you can guess what's going to happen, because you're going to flip a lot of lands off of this. There's also like playing a Azusa Lost but Seeking would be really good in this deck, because you're going to be flipping cards, getting extra land drops, exploration, stuff like that. Again, though, this is just kind of a mid precon that I would not personally want to pump all of that money into. There are, again, like those cards are sort of better in a Paco and Halden deck. So it goes back and forth. I want to be playing creatures in this deck, and I want to be attacking. To me, this is just a combat deck that gets some extra value off of combat. So yeah, Temporal Spring was the last one I was going to talk about. For upgrades, there was a plethora of cuts. First one I want to cut is Smirking Spelljacker. Let me pull it up so I know what I'm talking about. Oh yeah, speaking of holding up 5 mana in a combat deck. So it's one of the new cards, but it's 4 and a blue for a 3/3 with flash and flying. And when it enters the battlefield, you exile a spell an opponent controls. And then when it attacks, if it has a card exiled with it, you get to cast the exiled card for free without paying its mana cost. I feel like this reads better than it actually is, because you're probably going to want to save yourself from like a board wipe, in which case you're not going to want to cast that anyway. So Smirking Spelljacker is very win more to me. Like if you're just using this to like get something of theirs for free in addition to all of the other free stuff you're getting from them, feels fine. Again, holding up 5 mana is not what I want to be doing. And like I want to be tapping out on my turn essentially. And then having to wait until it goes back to you to then attack with it, and then you get to cast the thing for free. It's just a little too conditional for my likes. So I would cut that.
Yeah, if I was forced to hold that 5 mana in something like this, I'd feel like Spell Swindle would probably have to be the better choice as well. You still counter the spell, and then it makes you treasures afterward that can then be used to spend those, like to spend into the cards that you Gonti.
Yeah, if your interaction is gonna be 5 CMC, it should be something like that.
Better things to be doing at 5 CMC. Yeah. So the rest of these cuts, you will notice the theme here is this weird reanimator thing they're trying to do. So Diluvian Primordial is in no way supposed to be in this deck.
That stuck out like a sore thumb from like here. I was like, what? Diluvian
it like
Primordial?
Sort of does what the deck is trying to do, but again, it's 7 mana? Like that is just so unbelievably expensive. Like I don't want to just upgrade the deck and put a bunch of ramp in it. I'd rather just cut the expensive spells and just like fly by the seat of my pants here. Like this doesn't feel like a deck that should need a ton of ramp if you're not playing things like Diluvian Primordial. So get rid of that. Oblivion Sower is the same way. Let me read it so I can see. 6 mana for a 5/8 Eldrazi. When you cast it, target opponent exiles the top 4 cards of their library, and you get to put any number of land cards from their exile onto the battlefield. Is ramping what you want to be doing at 6 mana? Is that really what we need here? Is to play 6 mana to get more land?
Yikes,
Nope.
dude.
We're cutting that.
This is the kind of weird ramp you play in colorless decks
Totally.
to get to like a 13
yeah.
CMC Eldrazi.
If you're on theme, if you're blinking it, like sure, whatever. But that's not what we're doing here. We already talked about cutting the Mimeoplasm because why is that in here? We already talked about cutting Darksteel Ingot because why is that in here?
Dude, why isn't that like Relic of Legends or something?
Dude, Relic of it could totally be a Relic of Legends. Well, in my mind, I'm cutting the Darksteel Ingot and adding Liquid Metal Torque. So
Fair,
that it
yeah.
still is ramping you at 1 mana cheaper and has some thematic value and some synergy in the deck.
Yes.
Darksteel Ingot has neither of those things, so it is out of my library. Last one is the Blade Griff prototype. Let me see this one here. Blade Griff prototype is 5 mana for a 3/2 with flying. That says when it deals combat damage to a player, destroy a non-land permanent of that player's choice. Destroy target non-land permanent of that player's choice that one of your opponents controls. So like you pay 5, wait a turn, hit them with your 3/2 with flying, and then they get to pick something on an opponent's board to destroy.
That's just gonna make 2 people more angry at you.
It's
I know.
so
That's
bad,
what I'm
dude.
okay. Yes. I'm so glad we were all on the same page with that. I'm like, what?
It's horrifying. This is a horrifying card. I don't want it anywhere. There is zero scenario where I want to be playing this.
I feel like one person thinks this is like funny and then they do it. They play the game with this card and then they realize, oh God, this is the John.
Totally. Yes, John's playing with it. The only card I'm fine with keeping in here that's kind of expensive is the Brain Stealer Dragon, because it does really good things. Like alternatively, you can pay 7 mana for your 6/6 with flying that just has a trigger at the beginning of your end step. You exile the top card of each opponent's library, and then you get to cast them like it Gaunties on your end step. And then when a non-land permanent an opponent owns enters the battlefield under your control, they lose life equal to its mana value.
Oh wow.
Yeah, that's a win. That's an actual win con.
This is a win condition, right?
Yeah.
So like I'm fine with, we're probably not getting to 7 mana a ton or super quickly. What's nice is like you will have lands in this deck because you're going to be exiling a ton of lands from what your opponents are doing. Off of your opponent's libraries. So you're not going to really have to put a ton of card draw in this because Gaunty is so card draw-y. It's just weird card drawing off of what your opponents are doing. So overall, if I were to rate this deck out of 10, I would probably give it like a 5. I think like I could make this cool. There's cool things to be done with this deck. It's just none that I'm interested in at a $50 price tag. So
Yeah.
And that unfortunately just sucks because even the people I feel like that would be any bit interested to give this deck a whirl, the caveats at the beginning that you had mentioned, like this is a deck you can't even play at all online, really.
No, totally.
Like that's a huge hit for people. Like it's not unrealistic to say that, you know, this is an age of Magic where people are doing things more digitally between spell tables and arenas and other clients that allow people to play over long distances with friends they can't or won't be able to see much anymore. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yes.
I play 90% of the Commander that I play on spell table these days. So this deck is just completely irrelevant to me.
And then the other one that you mentioned as well, that even if this is the deck that you are playing in person, you had mentioned people tend to not like having their stuff stolen. That's one of those things on that SALT scale is like land destruction, theft, and stacks. Like that's your 3 big hitters of no in Commander, and this whole deck is trying to promote it. So
totally.
does
have
bring
PTSD from Elder Brain, Joseph?
I love Elder Braining people.
This
You
is
get to
just Elder
redraw
Brain
with
the
Elder
deck.
Brain, though. It doesn't even matter. I get to steal your stuff. You get stuff back instead.
So like I don't know. It's like who's the demographic of this deck? Is like
I don't know, but what I do appreciate is like I feel like you touched on this as well, Jared, of it kind of being a pile of reprints is if you just showed me the Commander, I probably would pick 90% of these creatures to be in the deck. Like they did a great job at picking like Thief of Sanity rules in here, Baleful Strix rules in here. Like there are, or again, Orin Frostfang, like unbelievable card in this deck. So they've done what they can with the theme for it. I feel like
it like does. It is a functional deck. It does do something.
Yeah, it's just the not thing, one that I'm interested in.
Yeah, it's just the thing that it does. People don't like.
Yep.
Yeah,
but there you go. That's if I was interested in the deck, that's how I would upgrade it. But that's that's our Grand Larceny deck.
Do as we say.
Jared, what is the thing that people like doing instead, Jared?
Quick drawing?
Spell slinging?
Oh God, I messed up my own joke. You were teeing me up perfectly, and I hit you with the Jared special where I mess up the joke. So
hey, that's why we love you, though.
Yeah, that's part of my features and traits.
It's true. It's a feature, not a bug.
Exactly. Let's get into quick draw. This is a classic Is It Spellslinger list from the Thunder Junction Precons. The face commander of this thing is Stella Lee, wild card for 1, and Is It? It's a legendary creature, human rogue, 2/4. That says, whenever you cast your second spell each turn, exile the top card of your library until the end of your next turn. You may play that card. So the better impulse draw is what you get off her. And then she has an additional tap ability, copy target instant or sorcery spell you control. You may choose new targets for the copy. Activate only if you've cast 3 or more spells this turn. So this works really well with any kind of Is It Spellslinger strategy that you can think up. That you get to copy your stuff, you get to do more of your stuff. That's what you're trying to do.
Yeah, it's like a love letter to Is It. It's like anything that you could want to be doing in Is It, Stella Lee just kind of like throws a little bit of gasoline on the fire there.
Exactly. It's not going to hurt your strategy. I definitely think there are better commanders for this strategy, but this is a commander that you can absolutely play and run
instead.
What?
Just play Mizzix instead.
Yes, dude. Way more fun.
This is a great card in Mizzix, I think. Like
so Is It, I feel like Is It as a color identity has a stronger color identity than any other pair. Like
true.
You can look up any of the other Is It Spellslinger commanders on EDHREC and they will almost all be viable as a commander for this deck. So just kind of experiment with whatever you want to. But let's get into the rest of this thing. The other commanders that you could run here. The new one is Eris, Roar of the Storm for 8, and Is It? That's blue-red. So legendary creature, Elemental Warlock. Notably not a wizard. That does matter in this deck because there's like a weird wizard sub-theme. The abilities on this creature, this spell costs 2 less to cast for each different mana value among instant and sorcery cards in your graveyard. Then it has flying and prowess. And then it says, whenever you cast your second spell each turn, create a 4/4 dragon elemental creature token with flying and prowess.
A lot of stuff going on in that.
This thing has so much happening. I don't love this card. I don't know.
I want to know why they didn't make it 2 less to cast for each mana value in your graveyard and that you own in exile. Because there's a ton of flashback in this deck.
Yeah, there's a lot of it. There's so many ways to get cards out of your graveyard that this will be uncastable most of the game. So yeah, you're never getting this off. It's also not a wizard, does not synergize with the rest of the deck. So we'll get to cuts later, but this is one of the cuts that I recommend actually. So moving on.
It's kind of cool, I suppose, that like if this were to be your commander, its own ability of cost reduction can help you bypass commander tax sometimes.
Totally.
That is true. It's definitely one of those commanders that suffers from it's just in the color identity, but it really belongs in its own deck.
Yeah. It's good after a turn 1 Faithless Looting, though. Like if you turn 1 Faithless Looting, dump something that costs 2, dump something that costs 3, all of a sudden he costs 6 less.
That's true.
So there's that.
but that's like perfect scenario.
Exactly.
So
wait, we don't
don't
base
bet
our
on that.
opinions off of Magical Christmas Land? Perfect scenario?
That's
Yeah.
how you level up your gameplay. Stop building decks like that.
Also completely off track from instants and sorceries, but it's a big dumb elemental that makes elementals go really cool into like an elemental cascade deck.
Ooh.
That could be sick.
Cascade does cast 2 spells.
Who knows? I don't know. Moving on.
That was the perfect anyway.
All right. This is a reprint, but you could run it as the commander and it would work. It's Kaza, the Royal Chaser for blue red. Legendary creature, human wizard. That is a good thing. Flying in haste, taps. The next instant or sorcery spell you cast this turn costs X less to cast, where X is the number of wizards you control as this ability resolves. So some of the wizard sub thing comes from this card. So the more wizards you cast and have on the field, the better this card becomes. But even still, this card is a mana dork and is it with haste. So
Very good.
that's dope. We take those in this color.
We take whatever we can get.
we need that. At first, I was like, "What the heck is this doing in here?" And I was like, "Yep, that's exactly what that's doing in here." It's if it taps for 1, that's a great thing, which it will because of Kaza. So the next legendary creature you could run as a commander, but why not just build a better version of his deck? Niv-Mizzet Perun, the legendary dragon. Dragon Wizard, 5/5 for 6 CMC, 3 blue, 3 red. Pretty hard to cast this card, but this card is an absolute bomb if you can get it off. This spell can't be countered, which is amazing because if you're going to make me pay 3 blue, 3 red, I really want it to work. It has flying.
Good point.
Yeah. And then it has whenever you draw a card, Niv-Mizzet deals 1 damage to any target. So it Orcish Bowmasters every time you would draw a card, which is sick.
That's hot.
And then whenever a player casts an instant or sorcery spell, you draw a card. So whenever a player, so it counts herself, so the more spells you do, but also your opponents. So this card's amazing. This card is one of the best spell slinger commanders that you can run because it just functions off of card draw. You don't have to build this in a weird, I'm going to make tokens somehow thing. You can just draw cards and win the game. That's going to be better. That's just a better way to play this.
Ironically,
and
anti-synergy with Stella Lee because Stella Lee impulse draws. You
I
have to
know.
cast from exile, not draw a card.
So you guys remember I said this is a pile of reprints earlier? This is a good example.
Also, the cowards didn't even put Curiosity in the deck. If you're going to put Niv-Mizzet Perrin in the deck, he immediately comes, like, if you unsleeve Niv-Mizzet, there should be a copy of Curiosity hidden behind it.
He should actually be a dual-faced card. No, that wouldn't work.
Veyron's in the deck, too.
Yes, Veyron's
to
incredible.
bring us back on the rails.
Thanks. Yeah, Veyron, you can also run as the commander. I think that's the last one in the box that you could pull. It's a 1 and is it for a legendary creature of a Freet wizard. So it synergizes with the wizard sub-theme too. It's a 2/2 with Magecraft. Whenever you cast or copy an instant or sorcery spell, Veyron of Duality gets +1/+1 till end of turn. And then it says there's a typo. If you
casting or copying.
You're reading this too?
We're totally reading.
Okay,
if you casting. Oh, no. If you casting or copying an instant or sorcery causes, it is grammatically correct, but it sounds weird.
We are being pushed through the meat grinder that is the English language right now.
Yes.
If you casting or copying an instant or sorcery spell causes a triggered ability of a permanent you control to trigger, that ability triggers an additional time. This is basically Panharmonicon for instants and sorceries. Dude, they should make keywords like that, where it's like Panharmonicon, and we just all know what it does.
Yeah, dude, let's get even more enfranchised.
Let's go. I mean, it's your game. You can do whatever you want.
Let's just bring a dictionary with us.
Yes,
glossary of all
well,
the
they already
things we
did
already have
Outlaws.
to
I'm
know.
like, you have to remember now what an outlaw is. That's like 5 different types of creature that aren't connected in any other way. So I don't know.
All right,
I think
that's
we
our
all know what a
commanders.
Panharmonicon is. So
Tell me
hot
about
takes
some
with
new
Jared.
cards in this deck, Jared.
Yeah, let's talk about some new cards. I'm a little feisty on this one. Sorry, guys. you get Jared
Dude, that's
unfiltered.
real. It is. I mean, it is genuinely frustrating that like they've been doing so well with these precons. Like you bought all 4 of the LCI precons because they were all unbelievable because they were
Guess who
thematic,
like
really
never
good
buys
decks.
sealed product? I don't buy sealed product. I do not.
They've been doing so good. Like at least none of these decks have a reprint that's worth more than $10 in it. Like there's for someone like me who's like I buy the precons so that I get another copy of Soul Ring, another copy of Command Tower, like all these things. I buy them as collections of cards. I'm like, cool, I at least get like there was a black market connections in the pirate one. Like these don't have anything like that in it outside of decent land bases.
Yeah. Especially this one too, because if you're not interested in playing Spellslinger, none of these cards are for you. They don't go in anything else.
No.
They're all Spellslinger cards, and they're all just like...
That's a really good point. It's hyper specific.
Yeah, it's like they're all reprints, but they're a deck that can't go anywhere else too. It's really weird. So anyway, not to rag on it too hard, let's get into some new cards. We've got, as far as new cards I like, Crackling Spellslinger is one that's been getting some attention online. I think this card is actually really dope. It's 3 and 2 red for a human wizard, 2/2 with flash. Says when Crackling Spellslinger enters the battlefield, if you cast it, the next instant or sorcery spell you cast this turn has Storm. That's crazy. The degenerate red player in my brain just like can't help itself. It's just like it hears the alarm going off and it's like it wants to pull the lever. Yes. I want to storm a finale of Devastation or something. Like that would be...
Dude, I want to storm
sick.
a Jessica's Will. What are you talking about?
Yeah,
dude?
or something like that. That would be like insane. Like,
yeah,
just the possibilities are endless.
But like, okay, talk to me about paying 5 mana for a 2/2 and then still having mana up that you've played spells before this and then played this and then played a spell to give it Storm.
We'll get into this. So if you build Storm the right way, this card's totally fine.
Yeah, you have nearly infinite mana.
You can totally do this. You can absolutely play like 3 rituals in a row and it'd be all good to go and storm off in a turn. Not the way that this deck is built. So in this deck, this card is not very good. But in other decks that actually build around the theme of Storm, this deck would be very good. So this is not a reprint, but it's a card that is like if you need enough of the other cards in here, buy the deck and just take what you need. Any thoughts on Crackling Spellslinger before I move on to the next one?
Nope. I just want to know how the Murders at Karlov Manor, the disguise precon got a Jessica's Will, but this deck didn't.
Dude,
that's all I want to know.
I'm like shaking my head at this deck. This deck is just like I don't want to be too negative. I literally just like wrote very disappointed at the end of my notes.
Yeah, I feel like we're doing a pretty good job here talking about the cool things about it, but also going like it's weird and pretty bad.
Yeah, we're gonna shoot you straight because it's Thunder Junction, baby.
Great. These are our thoughts. This is the Thoughtcast.
My next card out of the new ones that I thought was pretty cool is Thunderclap Drake. It's 1 and a blue, and it's flying. Instant sorcery spells you cast are 1 less to cast, so that's huge for you, especially you're trying to get those cost reductions on board. I think that is a good thing they do in this deck is they print a lot of cost reducers for your instant and sorceries, which those are cards that a lot of people, if they're building their collection, like honestly, if you're trying to build your collection and you want these kinds of cards, these are good decks for that because these are a lot of just like weird commander staples that you're going to need them at some point. You're going to wish you had these cards. But back to Thunderclap Drake. So for 2 and a blue, sacrifice Thunderclap Drake. And when you cast your next instant or sorcery spell, this turn, copy it for each time you've cast your commander from the command zone this game. So this is a way to kind of set up a really interesting play. So you can have it on board and save it for later it's just there cost reducing until you need to absolutely just do the craziest turn. So I think that's really cool. It's kind of like putting plot on a creature, but it gets to stay on the field and do something the whole time it's plotted.
I could also see this seeing play in something like Rogak Silas in higher power, maybe not quite CDH, but like something to where any of these, like, you get extra value for the number of times you've cast your commander is really good with partners, and especially one like Rogak that costs 0. So
yeah.
Also, Thunderclap Drake just makes me giggle every time I say it because I don't even like Drake that much. So moving on.
Dude, I was not expecting that at all.
Everybody's got the shots to fire in the quick draw deck.
That was hilarious.
Next card, please.
Forger's Foundry. I actually really like this card. This card is pretty sick. Kind of saves this deck for me, honestly.
Yeah.
It's 2 and a blue. It's an artifact. It has tap, add a blue. When you spend this mana to cast an instant or sorcery spell with mana value 3 or less, you may exile that spell instead of putting it into its owner's graveyard as it resolves. So you still get to cast it if it's 3 or less. It just exiles instead. And then it has a second ability that says 3 and a blue tap. You may cast any number of spells from among cards exiled with Forger's Foundry without paying their mana costs. Activate only as a sorcery. So you could just store up all of your stuff that you've just been casting as normal, all your cantrips, all your low CMC cards that you should have a lot of in a deck like this. And then you're like, okay, I'm just going to storm off now. Because this kind of fixes the storm problem where until you can actually get to the point where you can reliably storm off, you're kind of in this like weird rocky middle ground beginning stage of your strategy that you can get blown out really, really easily if someone can stop you from even getting to like the precipice where storm will even work as a strategy. So this is a really neat card. I think it's really cool, and I'm actually really stoked to play it.
Do you want to hear a really disheartening stat about this deck, though, with this card in it? The average mana value in the main deck without lands is 3.28, which is just above the threshold that this mana rock wants.
I'm just gonna cut out real quick.
Yeah, so there's good things to be done with it, for sure, but somewhere else, I think.
Wizards is smoking the stash that the Outlaws should be smuggling away.
Also, again, this card puts instants and sorceries that would be going into your graveyard into exile, which is anti-synergy with Eris.
Yeah, it's pretty weird.
It redirects where he wants instants and sorceries to be.
He's like,
you do get to eventually cast them. Like, what's cool with this is
forever in your hand like that.
Totally. This takes those cards from exile, and rather than like, because you don't get infinite times of doing that, like it casts them from exile, which will then put them in your graveyard. So they end up there eventually.
Yeah,
it's the bullet ricocheting around a little bit.
Yes,
it's just one of those things that's like when you start relying on cards being in different places too much, you never have them in the places you need them to be when you need them there.
Yes.
So if you need cards in exile or in graveyard and in your hand, like it just becomes this weird thing. And yeah, it's like you can see a strategic soup when it's there. it starts to make no sense when
strategy
it makes no sense.
Soup is such a good descriptor for these precons.
Yeah. Let's see. That was some new cards that we like. As far as let's talk about some upgrades that we can do to this deck to make it a little bit more focused and a little better. This deck, in my opinion, you could kind of gut it and go anywhere you want. It is kind of just a shell of Spellslinger, and that's no knock to it. That's what it is.
Yeah.
But Spellslinger can be built very differently depending on what you like to do and what power level you're aiming for, because that's like something you can do at a CDH level very easily with a lot of the same cards. So you got to kind of walk that line carefully. Yeah, let's talk about some upgrades. Joseph turned me on to a good one. The Passionate Archaeologist Let me pull that up here.
Assuming you're going to keep Stella Lee as the commander of the deck, and you're going to be consistently every turn casting a card from exile. Passionate Archaeologist. This is the guide for the upgrades. Is out of the box, you're keeping Stella Lee as the commander. Here's a few ways to make it juice up a little bit.
Yeah. With that caveat,
Passionate Archaeologist for sure.
Building around Stella Lee. So, legendary enchantment background. It's 1 and a red. Commander creatures you own have whenever you cast a spell from exile, this creature deals damage equal to that spell's mana value to a target or to target opponent. So that's awesome. It synergizes really well with that Forger's the artifact I just read that I can't remember the name of. There's a lot of things in this deck that actually do cause you to cast things from exile.
Like Passionate Archaeologist with Mizzix's Mastery is crazy because that just exiles all of them and then casts them all from exile. There's also both finales are in here too. Like Finale of Promise does the same thing.
Yeah.
Someone must have been listening to your top cards. We were playing Commander.
Like, oh,
dude,
this is
the fact that 2 of those cards made it into Precons.
I know, dude.
A week after we talked about them.
I was like, that's kind of crazy. Next, after Passionate Archaeologist, the next card we're going to talk about for an upgrade would be Remand. That is an instant. If I can pull that up.
Yeah, because we talked about this before the show, but there's there's 1 counterspell in the deck. And having something like a Remand gives you access to a counterspell when you need it, but then also if you can remand something of yours to then cast it again.
Yeah, it's really excellent.
With storm cards.
Yeah, exactly. If you actually do build this, you take this in more of a storm route because this deck actually only comes with 1.5 cards that have storm printed on them.
I like that 1.5.
Because technically the crackling wizard person that comes in this deck can make a card storm, but it doesn't give it. It's like you have to fulfill the stipulations to make it happen. So to read off Remand, for those who don't know, it's a 1 and a blue counter target spell, and then if you do, return that spell to its owner's hand and draw a card. So super good in this deck. It gets you card draw. It gets you more interaction because here's the thing. If you're playing blue, people think you have interaction. So you kind of have to have it. It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy where if you are the blue player and you don't have interaction, people are still going to play against you like you do. And they're gonna focus you and target you and probably counter more of your interact with more of your board because they're kind of expecting that interaction back from you. So especially because like if you are playing a deck that is in blue colors that has consistent card draw and you are allowed to kind of lean into what blue does well is control the game, like there's no reason not to do that here because that just allows you to more effectively win the game when it's your time. Because I think that's something that at the heart of this deck, I don't like the build identity of it is it kind of derails Spellslinger where it's like the whole point is to kind of go off and win. But this deck is trying to accumulate like small value over time by making tokens. It's like making Spellslinger into a token strategy, which is the complete opposite direction that it wants to function in. Not that there's anything wrong with
it's definitely one of the lower power options that you can do for Spellslinger.
It's good to have a board state, but it's also good to know when you're just derailing from your main idea and it's just hurting the overall synergy of your deck. So a recommendation from us is to take it in more of a traditional Spellslinger route and actually put more instants in this deck.
Things like Frantic Search also just like make this deck crazy good. 3 mana for an instant. Draw 2, discard 2, untap 3 lands. So like anything that's like free is going to get you to that 2 spells a turn.
Exactly. Our last upgrade recommendation is an Offer You Can't Refuse. It's another counter spell. It's amazing. It's an instant for 1 blue, counter target non-creature spell. Its controller creates 2 treasure tokens. So this gets you out of a bind in a pinch, and it's also not crazy expensive, which is...
And you can counter your own stuff if you need the mana.
That's true. That's a weird thing you can do.
I mean, if you're at a place where you're like, I've got 7 cards in hand, I'm holding a ponder and an offer I can't refuse, and I'm looking to impulse draw with Stella Lee.
Yeah, that's
ponder,
actually a
counter
very
I've made
real...
my 2 treasures back. I've cast my 2 spells. It's been free, and I've drawn a card with it. So
in these kind of strats, you can actually legitimately play those kind of lines,
Totally.
and they work for real. So
Yeah.
that's a pretty cool line that you can do. Let's make some cuts to this deck, and those we've kind of already mentioned. One of them, Eris, just kind of anti-synergy with a lot of what this deck is trying to do. Even though it kind of on the surface looks like it is synergistic, it's a sneaky one. The next one is the Terramander. This card
Why
is
is he
really
here?
really bad. Is this like
best case scenario is you get a 5/5 flyer. Best
this
case.
is a Ravnica reprint that no one wanted. Like, why is this in here?
Don't stop reprinting these weird uncommons, Wizards.
Like,
We don't want this clogging up the deck.
He's just a little guy.
If we can't even we can't even do it's like for a draft or like limited environment because it's in a precon.
It wasn't
For a
even
Commander
good
deck.
then, dude.
No,
I played with Terramander. It was not good.
That
then.
was
It's
never.
not good now.
I'm like, this is just kind of insulting to reprint. Like, honestly, I'm like, what are you doing? This is a waste of people's money. And then the next card, Leyline Dowser. I have no idea what this card is even doing in this deck, or what it's supposed to do at all. I don't actually understand what this does.
Yeah, with 0 top deck manipulation, it just becomes 3 mana mill a land.
Yeah, so for those of you who don't
Cool.
know what it is, it's 2 mana for an artifact that says pay 1 mana and tap this card to mill a card. That's a lot of work to just put a card in your graveyard instead of just playing any of the
Yes.
blue
If
cantrips
that
that would
card
just put
is
it in
an
your...
instant or a sorcery, it does go to your hand. But also, there's 19 creatures in this deck, and like a lot of artifacts and a couple enchantments and 38 lands. So I think your odds of hitting there's 30 instants and sorceries built in. So it's a 1 in 3 chance.
In a
that
perfect
you-
scenario.
In a
yeah.
perfect scenario that you've 3 mana drawn a card.
Bad.
You could play Brainstorm instead.
Dude, Brainstorm, literally,
Yes.
it is Storm. Play
Yep.
Brainstorm instead. Oh my! I didn't even have that in my upgrades because it's too obvious.
Yes.
That's like that
Well, since
was.
we've upgraded another one, get winged boots out of here, dude. What are we doing with winged boots? 2 mana for an equipment that equips for 1 and gives something flying and ward 4.
What is that supposed to do in this deck? I don't know.
It's not better than Lightning Greaves. So, and they're clearly fine with reprinting Lightning Greaves.
Not even much better than Swiftfoot boots. Honestly.
No,
It's just like this deck especially, I think, is the crux of like, what were they doing when they designed these?
I don't know, man. They just like had a deadline and they're like, well, these decks make money. I think. Yep.
Well, let's go ahead and move on from this deck.
Yes,
because I
we're
think
gonna
we've
move
said
on
about
from
all we
this-
can say about it.
This
John,
dumpster fire.
do you wanna
Yeah.
take us home talking about some cacti?
So we've got our last commander deck here to talk about here. This is the Naya colored Desert Bloom. A very interesting thing I wanted to just bring up about this, by the way. This is the 6th Naya deck precon in a row this year.
Wild.
Just wanted to throw that one out there in case y'all ever ask again for them to start improving red or blue. They're going to keep giving us Naya.
This is why my Boros deck is sick, because they just keep printing red and white cards.
Dang, that is actually insane. Wow.
But yeah, so this is a so it says it's Desert Bloom, and desert is definitely a theme that is in this deck. It is not the highest amount of synergy that is here, but there is a decent amount in here. Not the crazy low amount that everyone was like initially saying up, but there is room to improve. It's a good baseline at minimum anyway. So it is Naya color, but overall its theme is landfall, and specifically doing landfall back out of your graveyard, sending things to and from your graveyard and either battlefield or hand to use in other synergistic ways, specifically the lands and deserts to an extent. Our face commander of this deck is Yuma, Proud Protector. 5 and Naya for a 6/6 legendary human ranger. The spell costs 1 less to cast for each land in your graveyard. So he can come down pretty darn cheap if you have early means of getting lands sent off into your graveyard. When he enters the battlefield or attacks, you may sacrifice a land. If you do, draw a card. And when a desert is put into your graveyard from anywhere, you create a 4/2 green plant warrior creature token with reach. All right.
Great card. Very cool card. Very bad.
No, it's really cool. I definitely felt the latch with this one here because this is reminding me this deck, this commander, and this theme that's trying to do. This reminds me so much of my own personal build of Thalia and the Gitrog that is trying to do exactly the same thing.
Dude, I literally was thinking exactly that.
Doing extra lands, sending those lands to the graveyard for value, and then replaying those lands again to just keep repeating the cycle. This is kind of doing exactly like that. But in Naya instead of Abzan, so you get all the really good red landfall cards as well. I dig it. I very much like this one a lot.
It reminds me of Lord Windgrace too.
Yes, and basically any of those. Again, the kind of deck that wants to do lands in the play, lands to your hand, and then lands to the graveyard, back and forth, but just get in a new cool color combination that hasn't really done graveyard lands before. This is backed with the alternate new legendary creature that comes in this deck, Eerie, the Talented Sprout. He's just a little guy.
Dude, that card is so cute.
He's so precious. The Cactus Folk was definitely one of the most hyped thing I was most excited about when hearing Magic Westworld. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, oh, they're the spiny face cactus people. They're so good. I'm here for it. So Kiri is 1 and Naya for a 0/3 legendary plant druid. Gives other plants and tree folk you control +2/+0. And at the beginning of your post-combat main phase, return target plant, tree folk, or land from your graveyard to your hand. So the synergy with this one, I'll be honest, this one's not great as your face commander as is, because in the deck as is, there are only 3 other cards that meet the condition of being either a plant or a tree folk. So you're not going to get tons of value off of that. This kind of card just as is just going to be, for the most part, just recurring lands back out of your graveyard. It works really well with Yuma, though. If you have both of them down at the same time, Yuma is going to be sending your lands into the graveyard on attack, and then Kiri is going to be then pulling them right back to your hand that you can start replaying them again and get landfall triggers and things like that. So
That's awesome.
Not incredible as the commander, but a really cool build around, and especially if you wanted to do, again, a sort of like a typal matter thing of throwing this in with other tree folk or plants. I mean, there is a little bit of synergy that there can be in here. There is an Avenger of Zendikar that comes in this deck, so like having Kiri down when those plants are created, like suddenly before any counters, those plants are already 2/1 or 2/1s. Kiri gives 2/0.
Oh, then they're 2/2s.
It's real cool. It's really, really neat. Again, not awesome as the commander, but
right. You were right. It's a 2/1.
Really cool. And so then as you would expect
in the deck, though, no tree folk.
No, unfortunately, but that's okay. Again, build a tree folk deck with Kiri. You'll have a great time.
Yes.
The new cards in this deck, as you would expect, kind of have lands and or deserts in and amongst their themes. This is exemplified most with probably the best one I feel like in this deck, called Dune Chanter.
That's the theme song from Dune.
This
Thank
does
you.
look like It just does look like Dune to me.
So Dune Chanter is 2 and a green for a 2/3 plant druid with reach. Lands you control and lands you own but aren't on the battlefield are deserts in addition to their other types. Gives your lands the ability to tap to add 1 mana of any color, and can tap to mill 2 cards, and you gain a life for each land milled this way. Very cool, very cool. It's chromatic lantern ability, right? So gives you colors as you need. On a body kind of sucks, it's one of the benefits of chromatic lantern, the fact that it's an artifact and not a creature. So obviously this thing can get destroyed and then you lose that ability. Oh well. But it's cool that you can get it pretty early as is on a 3-drop. That's really cool. Helps boost the desert thing. Again, Yuma has that 3rd line. You're not going to have trigger too terribly often, kind of as is with this deck. Dune Chanter down any of the non-basic lands or basics that you end up playing in here. They'll become deserts with his ability. Granting deserts into anything you don't own on the battlefield as well. So any fetchable spells that say go grab a desert out of your library, this will enable it.
This guy's the secret sauce.
He is the secret sauce. He's the desert secret sauce.
Even with the Evolving Wilds and the Terramorphic Expanse that are in the deck, this will become fetch, go and get or you make a 4/2 plant.
Mm-hmm.
He's also Shaialud, the sandworm of the desert.
Yeah. Speaking of the sandworms, this isn't a sandworm. I just needed a segue here. Let's talk about Rumbleweed, because this thing is nutty. I love this.
So
It's our new little hoof, and I'm here for it. 10 and a green for a 8/8 plant elemental. It costs 1 less to cast for each land in your graveyard. The creature itself then has vigilance, reach, trample, and when it enters the battlefield, other creatures you control get +3/+3 and trample until end of turn.
Whoa.
Yeah, so basically take the concept of End-Raze Forerunners and slap a mana discount onto it equal to the lands in your graveyard. So in this deck as is, where you have a bunch of synergistic pieces that are going to be naturally just sending lands to your graveyard, but in something more constructed and built from the ground up, decks utilizing things like fetch lands and other mill effects and things like that, graveyard decks, this can very easily become an even bigger, powerful, more version of End-Raze Forerunners. Maybe not quite hoof, definitely not quite hoof.
As good as Crater Hoof.
But I don't know.
It'll get you pretty close without getting your eyes wet,
This will win a game. Definitely.
Yes.
It absolutely will win you a
the
game.
argument of Crater Hoof is not actually worth $40. They just haven't printed it enough. Where Rumbleweed will win you the game. Crater Hoof will win it more. It will secure the win for sure. Whereas Rumbleweed will probably win you the game still too. So
absolutely.
Same with Forerunners. And I think in decks like the Master, where you're trying to be milling cards and carrying in a reanimator deck that's trying to mill and then reanimate things, if you don't want to spend the $40 on a Crater Hoof, but you also want something that's better than an End-Raze Forerunners, Rumbleweed is now the option for you, which is great.
Yeah, I'd love to try to get myself a copy of this for my said Thalia, the Get Rock Monster deck. It would be so cool. That's a deck that is, again, like this one, sending lands in and out of the graveyard and creating tokens, which we'll show you about with some of the reprints and things like that come in here. But that's what this deck is trying to do as well. Doing lands in and out of the graveyard, creating an army as you do that. Then Rumbleweed, comes down cheap, and you just slam. It's very fun. Also, again, as a man of puns, I'm very happy to see something related like that here. Last quick one I wanted to bring up is Cataclysmic Prospecting. Red, and an X for a sorcery. Deals X damage to each creature. For each mana from a desert spent to cast this spell, you make a tapped treasure token.
Whoa.
Very good.
Very cool, very cool. It's obviously it's one of these that it deals, wipes the board for you. But in in a deck like this where some of your non-basics are going to be deserts, this will just incidentally give you a little bit of extra like mana back as you finish casting this spell that can then be used to help you rebuild if you needed to, say, wipe your own board for whatever purposes that happened there.
Yeah,
What's
dude.
that black spell that we were messing with in Shire the other day that we decided not to put in? It's like very similar to that. Or am I tripping and that was a red spell?
Oh, blood money?
Oh God.
Probably is it destroys all creatures and you make a treasure for each creature destroyed this way?
Yes.
It makes like tapped treasure tokens, which is at the end why we decided not to do it, but
That's blood money, yeah.
got you.
Yes. Yeah.
From Commander Legends Battle at Baldur's Gate, Dungeons and Dragons, a Magic the Gathering expansion.
Oracle
do
strikes
that?
again.
How do you do that? I don't know how you do that.
YEE-HAW.
Moving on.
YEE-HAW, brother.
Moving on. But no, yeah, Cataclysmic Gear Hulk. Oh, man.
Oh.
Cataclysmic Prospect. Sorry. I'm thinking too many cards in my head now. No. Cataclysmic Prospecting, I think it's really cool. Again, at face value, it's a wrath. Flexible wraths are always great. The fact that, again, like, out of the box as is, this deck has 15 deserts in it, so you're likely to have some when you do this. But if you were to take this and build it into a dedicated desert deck, like with the reprint legendary creature you could play in here, Hazon, Shaper of Sand.
Yeah, dude. Hazazon rules.
Hazazon. Yeah, you could build a dedicated deserts deck with him, and this will end up basically a wrath that replenishes itself later.
Yeah. Hazazon is a player favorite. I've heard so many people have Hazazon decks because it's like so cheap, basically. It also is kind of like Dune, which people love. Like it, yeah. Hazazon's great, and honestly, could very easily slot into the Commander.
He's real cool. He's a red, green, white for a 3/3 legendary human warrior with Desert Walk. Probably never going to happen if you're the one playing deserts.
No.
You may play desert lands from your graveyard. That's really cool that he's here because, again, some of these deserts that you're doing in this deck as is, you're sacrificing them, sending them to the graveyard. He allows you to replay it. He is one of 3 other cards in this deck that allow you to play lands from your graveyard, which is absurd for a precon. He also then, when a desert enters the battlefield under your control, you make 2 1/1 red, green, and white sand warrior creature tokens. So he does everything that this deck is trying to do. So there is a very real argument to say you want to play Hazazon in the command zone of this deck as well.
Mm-hmm.
Super cool.
Does this deck have all of the deserts in it that are printed?
Not all of them. No, there's most of, like, say, the colored ones, the ones that help you fix. So like Desert of the True, Desert of the Fervent, the 2-colored dual ones that are part of the main set as well. So like Sarasota Heath and Abraded Bluffs. So like you get your color fixing ones, but not all of them.
Yeah, a lot of tap lands in this deck.
Very much. But again, the ramp package out of this is quite high.
Yeah.
And a lot of these you're going to be wanting to send into your graveyard and replay anyway. So yeah, it does kind of suck that they do come into play tapped, but the how quickly you can get a lot of them back out of your graveyard into play with stuff like Ancient Green Warden, which is your high value of this deck. 6 mana, 5/7 reach. You can play lands from your graveyard, and lands entering the battlefield cause double triggers. Again, every deck has to have a Panharmonicon now, and here is this deck's one. And again, as I had mentioned about before, this guy at Hazazon is backed by, who's it here? Ramanop Excavator, and there is a
Scaretiller.
Scaretiller does it as well. Perennial Behemoth is also in here as well. So basically, for 4 permanent cards in here that allow you to play lands out of your graveyard. That is huge for a deck where it's huge for a deck where its strategy is wanting you to be either pitching them from your hand or sacrificing them from the battlefield, allowing you constant land drops back from your graveyard. Does that accelerate you? Not all the time. It depends how many lands you have the ability to play during a turn. But just the fact that you will essentially never run out of landfall triggers, that is the key backbone to doing a land-centric deck like this, and especially one like this that isn't just strictly trying to be landfall. It's trying to be landfall, but from your graveyard. It's very cool.
You put a Scoot Swarm in this deck.
Oh, yes. Please. I'm here for Scoot Swarm.
Rootin, tootin, and scootin'.
I think that card, dude.
Yeah, I've been noticing. Like I was so enjoying going through this because I'm looking at these token producer cards like Scoot Swarm, like Titania, Protector of Argoth, like who else we got in here? We've got Omnath, Locus of Rage.
That card rips.
Basically, like, this is the strategy that they're looking for you to do. You're looking to do these lands either from your hand or from your graveyard, and you're just going to make a token army. And it just, I resonated with this because, again, this is my build for Titania. Or not Titania.
All in your wheelhouse, dude.
Yeah, my Princess of the Frog. I'm all about it. We had mentioned Avenger of Zendikar. Oracle of Moldiah is also in here as well. This is something that will...
I got so excited when I saw that, and then just got so sad seeing that that's a $3 card now. That used to be like a $25 card, Oracle of Moldiah.
Mm-hmm.
How the mighty have fallen.
But it's a great synergistic piece, obviously with itself allowing you to play lands off the top of your library, but also the fact that it allows you to play that additional. If you have any of these effects down that say that you can play from your graveyard, you get to take advantage of that out of your graveyard. So you could do double lands out of your graveyard, and then if you run out of stuff in your graveyard, you then got the top of your library, and then your commander is sending them back into the graveyard. You see what I mean? Is like there's this engine that it is working through,
and landfall is strong. Like it's just a good strat.
It is exactly.
It rewards you for playing the game. Like you want to be playing lands anyway. Landfall just gives you so much extra value for doing the things that you're already trying to do.
It's so freaking cool.
You actually can get value off of Hour of Promise.
Yes, you can.
Nobody has ever made the 2 black zombies off of Hour of Promise.
It's so cool. Yeah, it's a real good one.
Every person has ever just gotten Dark Depths and Thespian Stage and been like, I guess I'll get Merit Lage.
Yeah, I was gonna bring that up at reprints. The only other one of like a kind of interesting. I wouldn't necessarily say this is a good card. It's not synergistic with the deck in any way. But I just wanted to bring it up. It was just kind of interesting thing. There's a reprint in here with the normal Magic frame that was originally from the Doctor Who Precon decks. The Wreck and Rebuild. This is one of the first ones we have seen that has come from Universes Beyond over into the Magic frame. It's not an amazing card. It can either just disagree. Okay.
Oh, I love Wreck and Rebuild.
Yeah, it can either destroy an artifact or an enchantment, or you mill 5 cards and you can put a land from your graveyard on the battlefield tapped, and then it has flashback. But it was just interesting bringing up to note that if this was a card you were ever interested in and just really, really despised the Doctor Who version of it, you can now acquire it in Magic Frame.
Nice.
So worth bringing up for anyone who wanted to bring that up or wanted to mention it. I've got a very interesting upgrade path for this one because this is obviously a deck that it wants to be super synergistic with sending lands into your graveyard and rewarding you for those lands in your graveyard. Brother, I know you love yourself some Dredge.
Light from the Loam.
Light from the Loam. Here we are.
One of my all-time favorites.
Light from the Loam, dude.
I was really hoping that I was not going to have to be the one to bring up Light from the Loam.
Nope, I got you. Yeah, the fact that Yuma makes you 4/2s as deserts go to your graveyard from anywhere, and then it's just a card that allows you to pull those lands back out of your graveyard, dredge, get more lands into your graveyard, and just keep pulling it back and forth like that.
Who cares about drawing cards? Who cares? I'm just going to
dredge
so good every time.
Lotus Cobra should be in this deck as well. Obviously, Lotus Cobra is very easily one of the best landfall creatures that you could throw in pretty much any landfall deck, just in general. The amount of extra lands that you'll be getting back out of your graveyard, Lotus Cobra will help minimize the fact that you're just recycling the same land over and over out of your graveyard, will actually help you build up extra mana to use on your turn for spells and effects and things of that nature.
Speaking of Lotus Cobra and similar cards, if you play the Nissa from Aftermath,
Nissa Resurgent Animist, that card.
Resurgent Animist, yep.
Should definitely be in
there
there
are
too.
2 elementals in this deck, and they're both bonkers.
Omnath and Titania, right?
Titania is that is also an elemental. Sorry, I was thinking Omnath, Titania, and Ancient Green Warden are all elementals.
Avenger of Zendikar is also an elemental.
Slammers, like you play you play a fetch land, and all of a sudden you get to tutor Avenger Zendikar out of your deck.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's a good segue, actually. As a matter of fact, is just I don't have a specific in here, but like if you're looking to do an interesting upgrade path on this deck in general, it kind of sucks to say just do better lands, but this is a deck that really wants fetch lands or sacrifice lands. Like obviously like the traditional fetch lands, but your other stuff like Prismatic Vista, Fabled Passage, you could do Evolving Wilds as well if you need to. Evolving Wilds, there's Evolving Wilds and the Terramorphic Expanse in the deck. Yeah. What's that that new one from Murders of Karlov Manor? It also does the same thing.
That
one.
Passage.
Yeah.
Escape Passage.
Yeah,
that's probably wrong. But
Escape Tunnel.
the hideout lands as well from like New Capenna, the ones that ETB sacks, that kind of thing. So like add more of those into this deck as well. Yeah. Conversely, to help also expedite the amount of landfall you're doing, play the effects like what Oracle Moldiah does, like Exploration. The cards that allow you to get extra land drops. Exploration, Azusa, does Dryad of the Elysian Grove allow you an extra land drop? I can't remember. I know he gives you Chromatic. I think he lets you play an extra land.
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah, so Exploration and Friends, the things that allow you to do extra land drops, those definitely play those in this deck as well.
There's an Explorer in the deck.
There isn't. Explore. Yeah.
Is
Dryad confirmed.
Draw a card. You get to play an additional.
It does what you think it does.
Yeah. Summer Blue.
Hashtag thanks the Oracle.
Yes.
Wait,
good stuff.
No, I can't be the Oracle. That's a problem. That's really bad for him.
You're in trouble if Jared's the Oracle.
I've got an interesting one here. Since this is a landfall deck that is trying to make a bunch of tokens, put Morag, Fury of Akum in here. Morag, Fury of Akum is I believe is a 6-mana 5-something Minotaur warrior. Landfall, if it's your main phase, you get an extra combat step after the combat step. So you can main phase landfall, stack up a bunch of extra combats, and then this is a deck that is making a bunch of tokens with stuff like, say, Scoot Swarm and Titania and Omnath and Avenger Zendikar. You just then get Morag down, do a couple landfalls on your turn, and now you have 4 combats in a row.
I like it.
That's crazy, dude.
That's very good. And again, one last one for upgrade, nothing in specific. A strategy you could do with Hazazon and then I guess potentially Yuma as well, if you build in the synergies that allow you to play lands out of your graveyard, you could build this in a mass land destruction way, but I would not recommend doing that because people do not like mass land destruction. But a card like Hazazon rewards you for blowing up your deserts with mass land destruction because you get to replay them out of your graveyard. So don't actually do that, but it is something you could do.
And unless you're playing against the new Gonti deck, and then it's fine.
Yeah.
It's even.
Man, just toxicity all around.
Yeah. Just real quick then, I'll breeze through some things that you could cut out of this deck in place of some of these extra landfall things. We've talked before about Angel of the Ruins. It's not an awesome card. I actually love the fact that this deck, from the last time we talked about Angel of Ruins, it has been downgraded to an uncommon. It's like they really want you to be playing this card. They just keep putting it in decks, but pop it out of here. Again, the plane cycling thing is really cool. Throw this in a mono white deck. I think it would be a much better card in there as well.
Even Eagles of the North is just a better plane cycler now. Like to have a 1 mana plane cycler, yeah, you're never casting this for 7. Like, it's decent if you're like reanimating. Like, I sort of toy with playing this with my Takasha deck because I can plane cycle it and then reanimate it. But even then, like, best case scenario, you reanimate it, you get something that has flying, and you exile 2 artifacts or enchantments. Like, it's fine. Better things to do.
Another cut I would do would be one of the new cards that comes in here, Sand Scout. It's a 2 mana for a 2/2 that when it enters the battlefield, if an opponent controls more lands than you search your library for a desert, put it on the battlefield, tapped, and shuffle. And then if one or more lands are put into your graveyard from anywhere, you make a 1/1 red, green, and white sand warrior creature token. The ability triggers only once each turn. It's fine.
That cut entirely, dude.
I mean, you're the land
rip.
rip. This is not good in these colors. You're doing the land ramp thing. You are going to be ahead of everybody else almost in 90% of the time.
Here's what
I think. I think that the second ability is way more valuable than the first one. First one is like, if it happens, great, you go and find a desert. Second ability of your milling cards, your dredging, like if you can play like a fetch land, like, or you know, an evolving wilds or whatever, and then dredge or whatever, like find some way to do this a couple times. Just getting a bunch of 1/1s is
but again, only limited to once per turn though, and then this ability is then tacked on to just another like just creature as is. Like this creature can get blown up, and like, yes, I know dies to removal, but like I don't know,
your upgrade guide, I just want to go on record and say that I disagree with you.
Okay, and that's totally fair. And I don't think the card is bad. I just don't think it's good within these colors. I think your deck, I think this as is out of the box, it's doing enough build up and ramp and acceleration, and then other cards that can make tokens faster than this. I just don't think this card is good in here. I think it's fine. It'd be fine for like especially
mono white deserts, baby.
Well, here's the thing. Like, you could, with the amount of basics that are in here, you could actually get away with playing land tax instead of this.
You could?
And it's only one.
Land tax doesn't make
white.
1/1s.
That's true, but do you need
my whole thing with Sand Scout on a serious note is that it only costs 2 mana. So like I'm hard pressed to cut it because it's so cheap that like you could just put this down on 2 and let it gain you some value for the whole game. That's the last thing I'll say about it though.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Also drop Unholy Heat out of here as well. Like it needs it needs Delirium to be any good. You're going to be getting mostly lands in your graveyard anyway. You're probably not going to be hitting that Delirium anytime reasonably. It's
worse than playing Shock for like 90% of the game, which don't play Shock. Like,
exactly. Yeah, drop this guy out of here and throw that other stuff in here. But overall, as a package, this deck is so cool. It's
very neat.
Lands is a very interesting, hard like strategy to build around because like on the one hand, you have triggers basically firing off for doing the most basic action in the game that is nigh unstoppable, basically. Yeah, like opponents can respond to landfall triggers as they go onto the stack, but those are still going to be resolving. And there's very little in the game that stops people from playing their lands. You know what I mean? It's so easy to have these go about, but then also that has to be balanced with actual good cards in the deck that reward you for doing this said land thing at all. You don't want to like overflood on too many lands, but then you also don't want to have too many enablers and then just have dead draws the rest of the game. This plays a
tricky balance to build these kind of decks in a way that doesn't mess up.
Exactly, it does. And that's what I like about the fact that this one has gone in the direction of allowing you to do your land synergies mostly out of your graveyard, because that allows you to have more of the enabler cards be filtered into the deck, and your land triggers are just going to be the same card repeatedly going in and out of your graveyard continually. It allows you to just keep your hand and your battlefield filled with gas and then just constantly be doing a land or two out of your graveyard a bunch, and then other synergistic pieces in here that help get those cards like from your hand into your graveyard, and then once they're done in play you can then sacrifice them, and then once they're in the graveyard you have other stuff in here that brings them back into play again, and it's a churning cycle of basically sending the same cards to and from, and you're just going to overwhelm everybody because it's incredibly hard to stop landfall stuff doing from what it's trying to do. And I like it. The most assuredly amongst these 4 decks, this is going to have the best ramp package overall. Like you are going to be, you will be flooded on lands with this, and that's one of the cool things, that being able to have too many lands down in play, you have something to do with them apart from just playing big fatties. I really like this deck a lot.
I think this is the most balanced of them as well, because it has interaction in it. You've got like your Wreck and Rebuild. This deck has a Path to Exile in it. It has the new Bovine Intervention, which is one of my favorites from the new set. Swords to Cowshares.
This deck can actually respond to what's happening around it.
Totally. It seems very interactive.
Which I think we all thought was the new standard for precons.
Right. They did too good. They set the bar way too high for us.
Yep.
Yeah. It's really good. I'm a big fan of it. And
very neat.
I believe with that, gentlemen, we've reached
4 decks.
We've reached the end of our precons.
We did it. We marathoned these.
Yeah. You all don't get to see this. We've done this quite late into the evening, so we're starting to the gears are starting to wind down. But final thoughts amongst these. Like, I mean, am I going to be biased in saying that I picked the 2 best decks just because I was most excited about this set?
You did, and I'm glad you did.
Same. I'm glad you got to be like so stoked about it. Like, I love that.
Heavy is the head that wears the cowboy hat. You know?
YEE-HAW.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Jared and I have kind of gone on enough about like these just don't feel like they you have to pay $50 for these and then probably need to spend another 50 to get them to a point where they're like really going to be competitive. And I'm not talking like CEDH competitive. I'm talking like be able to hold its own kind of thing. They seem very like hyper focused on their own thing, which is not really how 4-player works. I think these all just need, outside of the desert one, needs like a ton more interaction. So I'm not thrilled with them kind of throwing us the bone for the last few sets and then really like reeling it back in on us on this one.
Especially because the main set for this is dope.
Slammer. I think the main set of Outlaws of Thunder Junction is one of the best standard sets that I've seen in a long time. So it's great that they did that. It just seems like that's where they put their.
I was expecting to get some spree cards in the Spellslinger deck.
Dude, I think I've seen one spree card and it's in the desert deck.
It's not even in the Spellslinger deck. Oh my god.
It's Requisition Raid. It's an uncommon spree card that's in the desert deck.
It's in the most wanted deck as well.
Oh, sick. Nice. That's dope. But like, why not make something that goes in the Spellslinger deck? Like, it's so easy.
Yes.
It makes itself for you.
Yep.
Anyway, that's how we feel about it. Now you guys know what our thoughts are, and hopefully this was helpful if you guys are interested in picking up some of these decks. Like
also,
we went over some of them.
Like, prove us. Dope. Comment down below. Let us know what you're going to be doing with these commanders to make them viable and workable, and what you would do to upgrade these precons.
Yeah. Tell us how your Gaunty spell table experience went. I'd love to hear it.
I dare you.
Just 2 hours of, okay, everybody close your eyes now.
It becomes the worst version of Ristic Study Triggers. It's like, are you serious?
Awesome. Well, I think that brings us to the end of today's episode. Appreciate you guys being here. Appreciate you guys taking some time to review these precons, and thank you so much for watching. Again, give us some, if you made it this far, give us a like and a comment down below. We would love to talk with you. And then we have our Discord link down below. That's all for today's Thoughtcast. We'll catch you guys around. John, sign us off here.
Sayonara, partners.